Hi, everybody, and welcome to another exciting Innovation Insights podcast. I'm really happy today to be able to introduce a dear friend of mine. His name is Marty Keiser. He's a founder, inventor, and scientific author. Hey, Marty,
Hey, Jay, good to be here.
good to have you. Say, you have a kind of unusual route to the innovation community. You're not your traditional entrepreneur. In fact, you left a very well compensated Wall Street executive position to throw it all on the line and become an entrepreneur. What was the motivation for that?
Well, yeah, it's a great question. And I remember vividly the day we had lunch together when I told you that I was making that massive transformative change in my life. And here we are. The motivation, I spent the last 20 years at the intersection of science, technology, and capital markets. And the first part of my career was on Wall Street in the asset management industry. And I had a great experience in asset management. I got exposed to a lot of different industries and sectors and market cap structures and deal structures. And there's just a lot of exposure to a lot of different things. And in around 2016, I was raising capital for a growth equity fund. And that growth equity fund was making an investment in a company called Exact Sciences. And at that point in time, Exact Sciences was about 18 months into commercially launching their first product, which is called Cologuard, a colon cancer screening test that's become very, very successful over the
Yep.
years. But at that time, they were only 18 months into the product launch. And I watched them go from zero to $100 million in revenue within that year and a half period. And I was fascinated by that. In my Wall Street career, that was the first time where I had seen a company create a product that was very purpose driven, patient first and patient focused. And then to see the money and the revenues and the capital follow it at such a highly correlated rate it was just awesome to me. And I thought it was really a powerful statement that you could actually do good first and see the money follow. And as most people know, Wall Street, you can make a lot of money and then do good with it, but not a lot of people do good and make money in the process. And I just was really fascinated by that. And that was essentially the very early innings of the early detection liquid biopsy revolution. And at that point, felt compelled not just to sit by and watch it, not just to invest in it, but I really felt compelled to lead that revolution and to take some of the things that Exact Sciences did well and continue to build on that, and then rearrange some of the pieces and do things differently where I felt there was room for improvement. But it was really that moment in my life where I said, I've done very well. I've learned a lot of things. I've made some great relationships, but this is a unique moment in time where science, technology, and capital are converging in a unique way. And I felt like I was the guy to bring them together and make some of these things come to fruition.
Well, you're off to a great start. And, it's interesting because you've done something different with IV Bioholdings, your core company. It's almost like a venture studio. And why did you choose to go that route as opposed to starting a couple of companies or starting a company? And how do you fund all the different companies under the IV Bioholdings shell?
Yeah, thanks. Well, the initial inspiration for that business model came from my first employer in the asset management industry. Legg Mason Global Asset Management operated with this parent and affiliate model. And there were so many unique benefits to that model of information sharing, knowledge sharing, resource sharing, that if we created a centralized platform, in this case, Ivy Bioholdings or IVBH, as we refer to as in short, if we took IVBH and made it kind of the central science innovation lab and this company building platform, and we centralize all of that know-how, technology, and expertise, but then we could spin out our intellectual property and our science in the form of these highly specialized subsidiary affiliate companies, that we could create a lot of scale that way and create this model that's almost like a rising tide lifts all boats type of model, where each of the subsidiary companies focus on something very specific. So we have Mammogen in women's health. We have liquid lung and lung health. We have het gene and metabolic health. So there's no competing conflict of interest in the health areas that they're focusing on. but there is a lot of information sharing and knowledge sharing that improves the probability of all of them to be successful. Whereas most of the biotech industry is still relying on these sort of one-off moonshots to be successful, either one product that works really well or one company that works really well, but then there's not a lot of scalability or sort of repeatability of success. And so this model was really born with that in mind, is essentially a way to scale, but also a way to mitigate risk.
Great. I've got a kind of a follow-up question for that because usually when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, especially first-time entrepreneurs who are coming out of a corporate background, I'm like, no, you're not starting three companies. You're
Good luck.
starting one company
Yeah.
and one company at a time, but you take a different approach because you're not trying to run all three companies. You're bringing in industry people to kind of manage the operations, and then you get to be kind of the puppet master over the whole operation. Although you are intricately involved in each of the opportunities, could you kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think the first point I'll make is that all of the companies are unified by the singular mission of making early detection possible for every disease in the world at scale. And so, because there's that unified mission between them, they're almost interchangeable in so many different ways, whether it's women's health, lung health, metabolic health, and then the various diseases within there, they're still all unified by that mission and by that focus. And so that makes it a bit easier to manage. It's not like they're three completely different companies doing three completely different things. But to your point, one of the things that has really made this successful is at the right point in time, bringing in the right people, the right partners, the right advisors to help bring these technologies further and further through their life cycle and bring the companies further through their life cycle. So we spent a lot of time focusing on our scientific advisory boards, our board of directors, strategic partnerships, and then key employees that have, our core team is relatively small, but we built it very intentionally so that there's a lot of multidisciplinary expertise. So everybody's really good at their various tasks. And when we bring it together, we can wear a lot of hats. There's a few people wearing a lot of hats with a lot of expertise that we can contribute and deploy into all of the companies simultaneously, not just one at a time, but in parallel.
Right. And I know several of your team members, and it's quite impressive. If there's one key to your success in my mind, it's the fact that you're able to attract very, very high quality people that normally would not be involved in a startup,
Yeah.
but somehow you're able to mesmerize them into coming on board. Can you share with our audience a little bit about how you can create that kind of culture where people wanna not necessarily jump ship, but jump into
Yeah.
something that's kind of a riskier business than, they might be used to.
Well, I appreciate the kind words of the team, and they are pretty extraordinary people with extraordinary backgrounds. I think there's two ways that I've focused on that is number one is leading with the science, leading with the data. A lot of startups lead with hype. They lead with sort of a bold vision and a bold mission and sort of tout their own
Moonshot, yeah,
personal pedigrees and try to kind of leverage that. And from day one, I just said, no, this is the science, this is the technology, this is the core of what we're doing and what makes it real. And then you layer on, and if we can continue to build on that data and build on that very real biology and real science and turn it into a real product, this is what it will lead to. I think instead of starting with the mission and the vision there, it's starting with the science data and then showing what it could ultimately grow into. And do you want to be a part of that and be a part of that journey as we build upon it? And so that's one piece of it is kind of starting with the evidence. And the other part of it is the culture. I've always prided this is one of the things being a founder is really hard, as you know, firsthand. But one of the greatest things that comes with being a founder is you get to choose what kind of company you're building. It's your choice. And so for me, focusing on really valuing, encouraging, fostering diversity of thought, perspective, experience, those things have been, those are important to me. I don't want everyone to sound the same or come from the same background or have grown up in the same community. I like the fact that we've got this sort of melting pot of perspective and people are drawn to that. They like to know that their perspective is valued in a unique way. And so, I think it's that balance of leading with the science, the evidence, but also creating a culture where everybody's perspective is really valued and cherished.
well, it's working. and congratulations
We're
on
having
that.
fun with it, and it's growing too. We're bringing in new people,
Yeah.
as we
Yep,
speak.
it's amazing. I love seeing your trajectory. So, if you could share one insight with our audience, something that you didn't expect coming in, but as you've been going through this process, you go, "Wow, this is amazing." What would
Mm.
that be?
Hmm. Well, I don't know that I would say, wow, it's amazing. I think if you're thinking about a founder and you're thinking about the two ends, the two cliffs on either side of the journey, you have the first one of going from 0 to 1, that moment where you're saying, I've got a great idea and I'm going to take the leap to pursue it. That's your 0 to 1 moment. There's the other end of the spectrum of, you've gone through the whole entire journey and you're on the brink of going from 1 to 0. And that is very common in startup. And there's a lot of risk in this industry. And
Yeah.
then there's what I call the messy middle in between those two extreme opposite ends. I think what I've learned most through the messy middle is that there's really only three things that you can control: your attitude, your activity, and the quality of the stories that you tell. You have to remain positive. You have to keep conviction and clarity in your vision, because there are going to be points and times where the world stops clapping, but your mission still burns. And you've got to find a way to remain convinced that it's still a worthy pursuit, and be clear and focused in that. That's your attitude. Your activity is just continuing to do the work, keep executing. You don't have to have a list of 50 different things. You just have to have 1 to 2 things every day that you need to get done, and just keep knocking those things down. And then the quality of the stories you tell, like it or not, you know, I've seen plenty of ideas just never make it because they couldn't translate their message successfully and tell their story. And if, you have to be able to tell very quality stories that are
Yep.
highly impactful, that can get people to convert and come onto your ride. And those are the three things. There's really nothing else that you can control that I found beyond that. But if you stay really rooted in those three things, you'll make it through the messy middle and beyond.
Well, I've been intricately involved in your journey, and I've seen you stare into the abyss a couple times, and you never lost that positive. It's going to happen. I'm things may happen tomorrow, but we're going to overcome them and we're keeping moving on. So that's good. And to your last point, which I think is really compelling because I brought this up before, a lot of time you and I both know technologists who are such experts, such geniuses at what they do, and they try to run a company. And that's not their job. Their job is in the technology and like
Right.
you say, the storytelling. Is there something you could shed light on that? Because I think it's really important that a lot of our innovators out there who are scientists understand that it's okay to partner with a business person and let them tell your story. Sometimes it even sounds better.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's sort of two parts to that question. Is there's scientists and technologists that maybe shouldn't be running companies, that need to be able to see that and say, wow, if the purpose of this amazing invention that I created is to actually have an impact and be used in the real world, what can I do to ensure that that happens? And in some cases, that is stepping aside or moving into a different role. And a lot of people struggle with that. To me, I've never struggled with that because I know I want to see these technologies get to market, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes for that to happen. So, but I do think a lot of people struggle with that. The other part of it is, okay, maybe you are capable of running a business and growing it, but a lot of scientists and technologists aren't necessarily always the greatest storytellers. They're very caught up into the weeds of what makes it so special. They have a hard time simplifying it in a way that people can really understand in the broader population. And I'll just give you some props, unexpected props here, Jay, but you've recently done some things with Tail Capital that I've been really impressed with. You've got this wealth of experience in starting companies, raising capital, all that real hard experience, expertise, and wisdom that you've gained. But very recently, you've started to pull and inject artificial intelligence and combining your wisdom with AI to help founders and entrepreneurs tell better stories. And so we may actually just be entering into an era where these scientists and technologists can leverage some of these tools that you're bringing to market to help them tell better stories. And instead of just trying to figure it out on their own, locked in their laboratory, there's ways that maybe they can actually do that. So I think it's not that every scientist and technologist can't run a company. Some shouldn't, but if you are one that's meant to be, there's better tools out there to help people now than there used to be.
Excellent point. So we make these very quick, hard-hitting episodes, so we're going to wrap this up very quickly. But one thing I did want to ask you is if you could ask one favor from the people who are either watching or listening to this podcast, what would it be?
Ooh, a favor. I don't get to ask a lot of favors. I think having started my entrepreneurial journey around the time of the COVID pandemic era, I haven't been able to leverage as much of the in-person networking community building as I would have leveraged had I started things, 15 years ago. And so, if any founders are listening to this episode and they resonate with some of the things that I've shared about sort of the messy middle and the two ends of the spectrum, 0 to 1 and 1 to 0, and you've got real lived experience within that journey, I'd love to connect with you and just talk about what your experience has been, because I'm sure that there's a lot of wisdom that we can both pull from one another to make us all more successful. And so I'm really focused more on building out that community and spending that time with other founders, not just, constantly hustling with investors and partners, but really start to build those founder to founder relationships.
Sweet. And that kind of alludes to something that I'm working on right now with InSoCal Connect, my nonprofit, where I am building an online community platform where you'll be able to enter as a founder and join other founders in the community and start building your own little founder groups and doing all that cool stuff. Because I think there's still way too many silos in this innovation ecosystem, but we'll break them down.
Yeah.
Marty, we're going to be putting up a slide with your contact information at the end of this, so we don't have to go through any of that scenario. So basically, what I want to do is just thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, and let's continue to make impact and make things happen.
Thanks for having me, Jay. This is great. I appreciate you. Keep up the great work.
Take care, buddy.
Thanks.